Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and we've talked so many times before about pensions and the fact that there's a massive shortfall. We've talked about the fact that young people will likely not receive their pension. I mean, it just to depend on the banks and depend on this forceful theft of money to put into these funds that are invested terribly, and then the fact that individuals are dependent on it rather than independent and actually saving their own money is a huge problem to begin with. But also the fact that people, baby boomers especially, are so much in debt at the same time as being the biggest spenders into the economy, and then they're paying for their children's university funds and grandkids.
Trust funds?
There are so many huge issues with that, but going into this further, there's a new Zero Hedge article called Visualizing the Pension Time Bomb, $400 trillion by 2050. And it goes into, are governments making promises about pensions that they might not be able to keep? According to an analysis by the World Economic Forum, there was a combined retirement savings gap in excess of $70 trillion in 2015 spread between 8 major economies. As visual capitalists Jeff Desjardin notes, the WEF says the deficit is growing by $28 billion every 24 hours, and if nothing is done to slow the growth rate, the deficit will reach $400 trillion by 2050, or about 5 times the size of the global economy today. The group of economies studied Canada, Australia, Netherlands, Japan, India, China, and the United Kingdom, as well as the United States, of course. And John, you're going to go into a chart for us here that was put out recently. Now, this gets pretty extensive. Can you go into this?
Yeah, well, what we're looking at this chart, of course, is the shortfall of pensions around the world, and as you can see, the staggering size of the total shortfall, which is for the 2050, it's supposed to reach about 400 trillion, as said, and currently that number is 70 trillion. That's a massive number. We're right at the world GDP in what's promised to pay to other people,
which is about $75 trillion total. That's totally insane.
Yeah, it's completely insane. Then of course you have the United States, which is at about $28 trillion that they promised to pay currently, but in 2050 they're looking at almost $135 trillion. And then of course you have other countries. The UK is not as bad actually as the United States. The Netherlands is not terrible, but it's still a massive shortfall because it's a small country. Same with Australia is struggling. Canada is really struggling as well. And then if you look at China and India, what is promised there for pensions, they're up and coming. They have a massive, huge population that are just growing at a rapid scale. So you're looking at 120 shortfall in 2050 for China, and then India is looking at about 85. Now, of course, the pension shortfall is something that's, anybody that think that they're going to get a government pension or something that have been promised to them by the government are insane in the first place, because over time, this was written back in the day when people were supposed to live very little, and then of course there was a lot of more people that were able to fund it than now. Of course, I think it was almost double of what it is currently, which is 8 people per retiree.
Well, before you go on, John, I just wanted to mention that the notion of it being all the way in 2050, I think is absurd. I can't imagine making it to 2050. This has become just a huge bubble, and the problem is it's going to pop, and a lot of people are going to be very, very impoverished. And we can also thank a lot of inflation to do with that. The central banking system, the banking system, and the governments combined here. This is a collaboration effort to basically indebt everyone. And I think it's important that individuals sustain themselves and save for themselves, because to be dependent on the banking system and government, the very entity which is dependent on your dependence and ensures that you are in debt, because a debt slave is a good slave. A debt slave means that you are in perfect servitude to them. I think it's so important that people take this information and understand how to save for themselves. And I know it's also difficult when so much of your money is basically stolen and given to these funds. So that's a huge coercive part of this problem.
Well, the government has been dependent on, creating this back in the day. Nobody has been willing to say that this is enough, we can't give what we promised. And then, of course, they gone into higher yield, they gone into Argentinian 100 100-year debts, and then negative debt. They can't even go into that because that would make that they would say that they're actually losing money on their investment. So it's just a lot of insanity that's come around this whole pension debacle, and we're just seeing a lot more. And of course, with the growing population, everybody's getting older and older and older all the time. And people are going to live a lot longer than, we were used to when it was created back in the 40s. People have a lot longer life expectancy today. And of course, all these government pensions that are around that are promised to people, that they're insane because they are going to give full salary to people, for the rest of your life until you die. It's just crazy. This is an insanity that nobody's been willing to deal with. Now we're going to see huge problems, because what's going to happen when people say, well, that debt that the United States is not going to be able to pay, all those bonds that you hold in your pension funds, now you're going to, either they're going to default and then we're in real big, deep or you're going to have, 50 cent to 30 cent on the dollar that the pensioners are going to get.
Well, can you imagine the riots in the streets when everything starts collapsing? I mean, the amount of people, the vast majority of people are going to be impoverished, and that is going to end up with people being lynched. Unfortunately, that's the insane part. People are going to end up being lynched in the streets, and it's up to us really as individuals, because we are aware of this, to spread that information so individuals can save for themselves, so we can, I guess, make the problem as lesser as humanly possible as just two individuals in front of a video camera, because we want you to be able to overcome this huge struggle that is in the near future. And you mentioned people are living to older ages. As this chart says, they believe it will be as much as 103 years old, the average lifespan. And I think
people that are born in 2007, yeah.
Yeah, and so we're expecting all these indebted children to be paying into taxes to pay for these pensions, and we're expecting that these people are going to be able to live for like 50 plus years on these pensions on a regular wage. It's just absolutely insane. This is not going to go anywhere good, folks. This is why we need to look towards, the usual that I bring up so often here at WHAM is the food, water, shelter, self-defense, so you're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, gold, silver, cryptocurrency that has fundamental value. That is a great form of savings, in my opinion. This is not investment advice, just simply my opinion. But I think that these are great avenues to go down if you want to ensure your wealth and make sure that you're invested for the future and not looking to banks and government to ensure your future wealth. If you shove someone down a bottomless pit of debt, they are forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, which puts you into perfect servitude to them. They don't have to crack a whip. People will willingly become slaves because they are so indebted and they are desperate to be able to eat and survive. The basic fundamental of liberty itself is survival. The basic fundamental of life itself is survival, staying alive. And people get into desperate situations and they take desperate measures and they become willing slaves to the establishment that surrounds us, that put us in this situation in the first place. This is why it's so important that people understand this problem. John?
Well, it all comes down to the end game. And if people want to trust in this game, they're going to end up, having a living standard that they thought, they're going to be able to travel a little bit, maybe have that nice vacation home down somewhere. It's not going to happen. They're going to be at home, barely scratching by and barely surviving, barely being able to feed themselves a lot of times.
And then paying off their children's university debt to never get a job.
Yeah, no, forgot about all the debt. It's just insane, Josh. And this is just going to take, this is just a bubble of epic proportions, this whole pension bubble. It's so much unfunded liabilities, and all that money that is promised. The reason why I call it an unfunded liability is because the government has promised that to people, but they don't have it. So they got to borrow a substantial amount of money now as the retirees are coming out and retiring, and they got to pay that old age pension. It's going to bankrupt any country around the world, just going down this path for a couple of years, the next 10 years. And of course, with like all this happening, it's not, the whole currency system is falling apart as well on top of it. So it's just like kind of the end game of what is happening is there's been so many promises that nobody were able to actually give to people. But of course, politicians, they to get elected so they can promise and do whatever they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why it's so important that people break free from that, and individuals watching this to, in any way they can, invest for their future and find ways around this. And I would advise, in my opinion, I can't say I advise, just stay out of the stock market, which is also bubbled. Everything's bubbled. Everything's full of debt, derivatives, insanity. And individuals need to save for themselves and not in fiat either. People need to look in other avenues outside of the fiat centralized system. Decentralize everything, folks.
Yeah, just one last point is, of course, I think I said this before, but go and ask your, even if you have money privately, go and ask your financial advisor this. What if I am retiring right now and we have a massive stock market or bond market crash? What will happen to my portfolio? And see the response.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth.
Be the change.
Like what you see here, WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized and censored by YouTube as the ADL comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. Also, check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also find us at steemit.com at Josh Sigurdson, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in Steem, the cryptocurrency. And also find us at the Red Pill Expo, which we have a reference link for below in the description and the comments as well. Hosted by G. Edward Griffin, amazing speakers coming out to speak this year. Don't miss it. It's in Spokane, Washington, June 21st to 23rd. We hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Bye.